just have to appoint a chair, so.
Okay, so I can sit for that? All right.
Do we have to address that during or you'll volunteer that information as soon as we open?
Why I'm being asked to recuse?
No, I don't think you have. Well, I don't know that. Is that an important? We're ready to go. You're in charge. Guy in the middle.
We have an agenda. There is no chairman yet, but I'll at least begin the meeting. It's the Guilford Building Code Board of Appeals. The meeting is beginning at 4:37. And the members present, if you would kindly introduce yourselves.
I'm Chris Anderhagen.
And my name's Bernie Lombardi.
Charles Alberico and Russell Campaign.
Okay. The first item on the agenda is the appointment of the chair. Do we have any nominations?
I'm going to nominate you, Bernie.
I will second.
Okay. It's a single nomination. All those in favor signify by aye. Thank you. Opposed? Second item is appointment by the chair of members sitting at the meeting. And I would say we have a quorum with 4 members, and all 4 members will be sitting for the meeting.
Bernie, I was brought outside to discuss with an attorney on the opposition, and he's challenging my impartial nature on this. And I think since you have a quorum, and since this would be a risk potentially to the decision that's made today, I guess I will recuse myself from this.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Okay. And as such, I think I should not participate.
That's an excellent first meeting for you, isn't it?
It was, yes.
And approval of the agenda, of today's agenda, which reads as follows. Ocean Co. LLC, 485 Whitfield Street, map 29, lot 108. Did I mispronounce that? Appeal of Assistant Town Engineer's decision dated September 30th, 2016 regarding compliance with flood damage prevention ordinance. The second item is Ocean Co. LLC, 485 Whitfield Street, variance from requirements of the Flood Damage Prevention Ordinance, section 1745B, definition substantial improvements. See other business and then adjournment. The first item are the applicants present for, yes,
I'm
please.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Yes, the applicants are present. My name is Peter Burdun. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Burdun, Young and Margolis. I'm here to represent Ocean Co. and at the appropriate time we'll introduce the folks that will be participating.
I would guess this is the appropriate time.
Okay. I guess just a point of order. Obviously, since you meet fairly infrequently, I guess the last meeting might have been 5 years or so ago, according to your staff. And frankly, having not had an appeal of this nature, wasn't sure how it was that you were intending to plan in terms of conducting the meeting. I guess several questions. One is we have both an application for a variance. The other is we have an appeal from a decision of the assistant town engineer. What was the intention in terms of how those two hearings should proceed from an evidence standpoint? Is it the commission's pleasure to kind of combine the evidence of those two hearings and do it kind of as a single matter, or would you, because some of it's going to be somewhat redundant, or would you prefer to have the evidence separated for those two proceedings?
My preference would be to have the evidence separated. There are
Okay.
two distinct, I think, items under the flood regulation.
We can go ahead and we can do that.
And I would think that the first item is to present your appeal.
And then the second question is since your regulations don't really address this, is it the intent that this is a a public hearing where the public is going to be participating, or is it going to be simply a meeting where the applicant and the town is going to be making a presentation?
My understanding is that it is not a public hearing. Since I'm relatively new at this, as these two others, I don't know what the procedure has been up to now. Public hearings as my understanding, are published in the papers as public hearings. This is, I thought was published as simply a meeting of our board, in which case there would be
No
no
public
public
hearing.
hearing.
Mr. Chair, if I have a suggestion, this is Chuck Andrus, I'm an attorney for the town that
Mhm.
has to come and assist you understanding that you haven't met for many years. I think you're absolutely correct, this is not a public hearing, it's a regular meeting. I don't believe this board has bylaws that says, you know, what you should do in the event of non-public hearings. The default position regularly is that for not a public hearing, it's up to you, it's up to the commission whether to allow public input or not. So it's within your discretion. If you'd like to, you can. If you don't like to, you don't. You're not required to.
Thank you, I'm happy you're here. What's the sense of the board?
I'm not, because this is an appeal, I'm not sure that we need public, at least at this point, I wouldn't think we would need the public to view or to voice
Yeah,
anything.
I agree.
Well, the members of the public are here, so they're certainly aware of what the procedures will be and can listen to the presentation as well as we can. I would, if we may, we could hold off whether we want to hear public input after the attorneys present, the applicant presents their information. If that is acceptable.
That's fine. You can play it later.
Then let's leave it at that.
And I'm just making an assumption here, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the nature of the proceeding would be for both instances, since we carry the burden, that we would make our presentation. In the instance of the appeal, the town would provide its rebuttal evidence, or primary rebuttal evidence, and then we would have the opportunity to rebut that, and then the kind of hearing portion of that would be closed. Is that a fair
That's,
assumption?
to me, yes, that sounds fair. Is the assistant town attorney, engineer?
Mr.
Mark?
Damian is there, he's
Yeah.
kind of got squeezed out of the room, we're a little packed tight, so he is here.
Okay. Would you like to find a seat, Martin, or you'd rather be, okay.
And just for the record, we do have a court reporter here who is making a transcript. I wasn't sure, given the fact that you meet so infrequently, whether or not there'd be recording devices here or not, so as a backup, we did bring a court reporter, and I do see that Mr. Johnson brought his camera, as is typical for these meetings, so.
It's actually GCTV.
Okay, great, excellent. I do have some evidence, and so I thought maybe what we could do is I can get the evidence in, out of the way, and then we can get that stuff marked, and then we can discuss it. That would work for.
Just one moment, before we start, to be open, I just want everybody to know that I received in the mail anonymously FEMA Chapter 5 about how you address SISD and also variances. Don't know who it came from, it's got highlighted portions. It's nothing you can't find online because I went online, but I just want you to know that somebody reached out to me in December prior to the meeting.
Me as well.
Okay. We could maybe just get that marked as an exhibit, that would be fine.
Perhaps we can hand that to the clerk and mark that as an exhibit.
exhibit's going to be an appraisal from Blue Ribbon Appraisal. Just for the record, our second exhibit is going to be an affidavit from Charles Beckius.
If you don't have copies, you can give to Mr. Damiani.
Mark, what?
Is that, and how do you have all that?
Yeah,
If
yeah,
it's-
it's the same thing we sent back to me in January, so.
Okay.
You want, come and sit, you sure? What, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna proceed then with the appeal from Mr. Damiani's decision dated September 30th, 2016. And I'm assuming that that decision's already part of the record? Is that a fair assessment?
Does the clerk have a copy
Copy
of
that.
that decision? Do we-
His decision is letter to Rockford, Mr. Rockford.
Yep, the letter to Mr. Rothberg dated December 30th, 2016.
And each of the members has copies of that? as well?
Yes, correct.
Okay, great. Excellent. Let me just begin by just kind of a brief introduction, and I'm going to go a little bit into, bleed a little bit into the other hearings. I just anticipated we would do both of these at the same time, but we'll try to keep the evidence separate. Again, by way of introduction, my name is Peter Verdun. I am an attorney with the law firm of Verdun, Young and Margolis. We have offices in New Haven as well as in Brantford, Connecticut. And joined here tonight by Charles Beckius, who is a representative from Ocean Co., the property owner. In addition, I have Mr. Liberti. He is the individual who performed the appraisal that you have from Blue Ribbon Appraisal, together with Mr. DeMeo from Munger Construction. Before I forget, I want to also put in Mr. DeMeo's estimate as well.
So is this new, Peter?
Yes.
This is new?
That's new.
Okay, can you give it to, perhaps give it to Mr. Damiani
Yeah,
and maybe
sure.
Mr. Frankie?
I only have one copy.
Okay.
We also have Mr. Thompson, who is an architect who's also going to be providing a presentation. His presentation, however, is going to be more focused on the request for a variance. As you all may be aware, Guilford has a flood prevention ordinance. That flood prevention ordinance, we acknowledge, requires that a person within the flood zone, as defined within the regulation, before they engage in substantial improvements, must undertake to obtain a development permit. The facts of this case are pretty straightforward, I think, except for one dispute, and that's going to be the dispute over the value of the building. But it's undisputed that from late 2014 into about March of 2015, my client did work to an existing three-car garage that is located on the property at 485 Whitfield. How far would you want? Let the overview, if you don't mind. An aerial, like that? Yeah, actually. And just because I think pictures are always easier to understand, and I sit on the ZBA in my town, I find it always better to be able to actually look at something. This is the subject property here with an extension down here. Couldn't quite squeeze it onto the size of the plot here for the survey. But you see Whitfield Street to roughly the east of the property, to the south of the property. Down here would be the town dock. It's immediately adjacent would be town, would be the Guilford moorings. You have the existing house that's located in close proximity to Whitfield Street, and relatively to the north, you have the three-car garage. This is a structure that's subject of both applications here before you. It's a historic structure. It's a post and beam constructed structure, probably dating back to the early 1800s. And what was done back in 2014, 2015 is my client reconstructed piering or footings for that building, established a concrete floor, and did some other work such as installed new doors, upgraded the electrical system to the building. The total sum of that work, as outlined in Mr. Damiani's letter of the 30th, is about $28,000. Now, Mr. Damiani's contention is that the structure had at that particular point in time, before any of this work was done, a value of approximately $20,000. We dispute that. The way to determine value is twofold. One way is to do a direct sales comparison approach, where you compare the sale of one property to another and make adjustments to determine what you think the value of that property is. The other way is to use the cost approach, which is to say it will cost you X number of dollars to construct that property. How much will the land cost? How much will the improvements cost? And then total it up. Our appraisal uses both approaches. We come up with a depreciated value for the garage alone of $68,000 and change, which is significantly, obviously, different than the town's valuation of $20,000, but is more than the 50% of the value of the improvements. So we would not fall within the definition of substantial improvements as defined in your flood prevention ordinance. Substantial improvements are defined where you spend more than 50% of the fair market value of the building. In addition, that appraisal supported by Mr. DeMayo's cost estimate to build the structure, which is $97,000, higher than Mr. Liberty's determination of value. Mr. Liberty gave a very conservative determination of value, but a reasonable determination of value. It's a building that's approximately, again, 20 by 30, and was constructed of post and beam construction. The client is entitled to have that type of historic building replaced there. By way of example, you have your car gets involved in an accident, you have a right to have the parts replaced with, manufacturer quality parts. You don't have to go for substandard quality parts. Here we have that nature, that nature of a building here. And so it's our contention, again, that the evidence that you have before you, the evidence that was before Mr. Damiani, shows that we did not spend more than that 50% threshold under the statute. And in terms of kind of the evidence for the appeal, that's what we're gonna rely on here for you today. It's pretty straightforward, and we think that we should prevail on that issue. Mark?
Mark, you?
Step away. And obviously, you know, if the commission has any questions of either Mr. Liberti or Mr. DeMeo, they're here, they're available to answer any questions that you have. My guess is we'll probably get into that into the follow-up.
Good afternoon, I'm Mark Damiani, Assistant Town Engineer for the Town of Guilford. I could, for not, if it pleases the committee or commission, I'd rather not be very repetitive, and I'd like to have Mr. Al Frankie of Advisra Corporation to sort of answer or explain the town's position, how the town came to the decision. Basically, Al Frankie has did the appraisal of the building that we're talking about for the town, and that's how that's the information that the town needs to make its decision. So if it please, I'd like to have Al Frankie talk.
Excuse me, Mark, before you
Yeah.
step up, do you have any other appraisals done of the building?
None that the town did, but we had, I did see another appraisal prior, the prior owners
Okay.
had an appraisal done that crossed my desk, but that wasn't something that the town did.
Okay, and so you're saying to this committee here that you had no other appraisals that were done other than Mr. Frankie's?
But he said by the town.
By
He
the
said he
town,
saw other
by the
appraisals.
town.
When I say you, I mean addressed to you.
With my name, I only know of that one
Okay,
addressed
thank
to
you.
me, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Al Frankie. I'm a real estate appraiser with Advisra. I was requested by the town to appraise the garage structure itself as of December 1st, 2014, retrospectively. In doing that, I visited the property with Mr. Beckius. I reviewed the property had been sold. I had reviewed some prior photos of the garage online because the structure had been changed by the time I was out there. I also reviewed an older appraisal report which had a photo of the original, what the garage was like then. And there's only one way to value this property, and that is the cost approach. What we have is a 20-foot 3-inch by 29-foot 3-inch structure with a salt box roof. It's one story, it's framed. It was built around 1770, so as of our valuation date, we had a 244-year-old structure. I've estimated buildings have physical lives, you know, the building's going on 250 years old, but they also have economic lives. And when buildings are like cars and boats, they depreciate over time. They wear down physically, functionally. So this was an older structure. From my discussion with Mr. Beckius, and what I was aware of, the building was in average to below average condition prior to the renovations. And in working a cost approach, we had to reconstruct on paper what it would cost to build a replica of the building, subtract depreciation, and we would be left with the value of the structure. The problem with a sales comparison approach, which is in the other appraisal, is that it includes the value of the underlying land. So that would have to be deducted out from there. So there are only three ways appraisers value property: sales comparison, cost, and income. And in this case, the only relevant method is the cost approach. In doing that, after having understood what was there at the time, I went to a cost service that our firm subscribes to. It's called Marshall Valuation. and estimated a construction cost to rebuild the garage of $41,000. As a backup, I retained a local contractor to put together an estimate based under the same conditions, and the contractor came up with $44,000. My final estimate of cost, I relied on the contractor's estimate, which was $44,000. This was a two-bay, oversized two-bay garage, formerly three-bay. It was an old carriage house or a barn at one point. It's my understanding there was a wood floor. The wood floor was falling in. It was post and beam framing. Somebody had put a faux slate roof on it at one point. In any event, we have a construction cost new of $44,000. Then we have to deduct from that depreciation. And the FEMA guidelines and Guilford ordinance talk about the value of the structure. So it makes it a little more difficult because we can't do a sales comparison approach. We have to ignore the value of the underlying land. In estimating the value of the structure, buildings have economic lives, as I mentioned, and an economic life is different from a physical life of a building, meaning an economic life is the period of time over which the building contributes to the value of the property. As I say, they depreciate, become obsolete. Economic lives in houses or garages or buildings get extended when renovations are done. It shortens, it extends their economic life, shortens what we call effective age. We have an actual age of the structure of 244 years. I've estimated the effective age on the garage as of December 1st, 2014 of about 35 years. The formula for calculating depreciation is to take that effective age of 35 years, divide it by its total economic life, which is about 55 or 60 years given that construction quality, and that will give you an estimated depreciation. That works out to about 61%, meaning the structure itself was about 61% depreciated at that time. Had wood floor, there were some, so in that overall depreciation, there was physical deterioration. There are three components to that: physical, functional, and external. There were two components present. One was physical deterioration, the other was functional obsolescence. When I say functional obsolescence, this building had a deteriorated wood floor. You couldn't drive a car in there, couldn't support the weight, but for an old carriage house, that's what was there. So I had to then parse out the amount of depreciation due to that functional obsolescence because FEMA, under their requirements, doesn't allow you to include that. They simply allow you to take the physical deterioration off. When I did that, I came up with an estimate of overall depreciation of about $23,500. That number gets deducted from the cost to reconstruct the building of $44,000, and you end up with a depreciated value of the structure of $20,500. That's about $10,000 a car bay, and that's reasonable for what it was. And so, in a nutshell, that's the process. Happy to answer any questions. I don't know if you have a copy of my appraisal report, but this is, it's all outlined in there. Okay.
Do you know that the Blue Ribbon appraisal included land? in
Yes,
that
it did.
value?
Yes, it did. The $68,000 includes the underlying land.
Do you have any opinion of what that would, how the Blue Ribbon appraisal would change with land deducted?
I don't. It would be less than $68,000, but it's actually a complex calculation. I'm trying to figure that out.
Yeah. Are there any pictures of before and after?
In my report, I have a picture of the garage before. It's actually on the cover, and it's also, I believe, included in.
Yes.
It's also on page 5. That was taken from a May 29, 2013, appraisal of the property.
No, yeah, I don't know, I mean, inside, so it's.
No, I don't think there's any interior.
No interior.
Oh, no, not before, no, I'm sorry, not having any pictures before. And by the time I had been out to the property, it was June of 2016, so that the interior had been renovated.
Were there permits taken out for this work?
I don't know, I didn't check the permits because I was appraising it retrospectively.
Yeah,
Yes,
for-
we do.
For windows, insulation, and doors for $4,000.
But not for the beams?
For the beams,
Here's the- That's the permit that we
Sure.
were provided.
If I, if the,
The only description
I may?
was.
Sure, yes.
Mark Damiani for the town of Guilford. Some of the work, there were permits, there were permit taken out for the new foundation. And there was a permit for upgrading the electrical. And there was a permit for the rest of the work, but that one was denied. That's, the best of my knowledge, that's how I remember it.
It was denied?
Yes, because it was denied because the town decided, or made the decision that Mr. Frankie's appraisal was the, for less of a better word, more accurate maybe, appraisal. And so then that's when the letter went out to the applicant, basically saying that they need to comply with the flood ordinance. And so that permit was denied,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Is that why, on the permit, the planning commission approved it on 11/18/15, and your office denied it on 9/30/16? Are those the reasonably accurate dates?
Yeah, can you just repeat those again?
The original permit, the town planning and zoning approved it on 11/18/15, and your signature has a denial of 9/30/2016.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. They had I wasn't involved in, I'm not familiar with zoning, but they had to go before the zoning board to get their permits and everything, and they were granted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why the delay? Although that's not, it's only 4 months.
Well, I
right?
could-
It's only
No, it's
4
actually-
months.
I could have, if you want.
No, because this is
11.
2016, this is
No, it
2015.
wasn't.
Yeah, but this is the November, and, this is 9
September.
September, so almost a year. Yeah,
Well, going back and forth with the applicant, we had several meetings with the applicant and with town staff to try to resolve the issue. And so that took some time to get everybody together. Sometimes people weren't available, people were out of state or whatever.
Okay.
So it took a while, and there was also, I guess, consultation with DEP, the flood section of the DEP, just going through this and doing research.
Any questions?
The Inland Wetlands Commission, they had no problem with,
I don't know, what does it say on the back?
it says a permit required, no.
No, they, yes, then they didn't need a permit. I hate to speak, well, we tend to think that's more tidal wetlands. I don't know if that's their jurisdiction, but I hate to speak for them.
Okay.
Okay, yes, thank you.
thank you.
Can I just ask Mr. Frankie a couple quick questions? Mr. Frankie, do you know Mark Nadeau?
Yes,
Who is he?
Mark Nadeau is a local real estate appraiser here in Guilford.
And you do a fair amount of work for the town of Guilford in tax appeals, do you
Yes.
not? And Mr. Nadeau does a fair amount of work representing taxpayers appealing their assessments, does he not?
Yes,
And often, Mr. Nadeau will prepare an appraisal in those cases, and you'll also prepare at least an opinion of value in those cases, correct?
yes.
And in those cases, is it not true that Mr. Nadeau's value tends to be, on whole, lower than yours?
Not always, but sometimes.
Mostly, right, because he's arguing for a lower value for his
Sometimes.
clients, right?
Sometimes.
and you're arguing for a higher value to maintain that for the town, is that correct?
No, I'm arguing for what I think the property is worth.
Okay. And was it disclosed to you by Mr. Damiani that Mr. Nadeau had done an appraisal on this property, on this garage specifically in connection with this matter?
No.
And did he not disclose to you that, in fact, Mr. Nadeau had an appraisal done based upon a sales comparison using data from sales of garages located within the town of Guilford?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
And did he disclose to you that in January of 2016, some 6 months before you completed your appraisal, that he had in his possession an appraisal that would value this garage based upon a direct sales comparison of $75,000?
I wasn't aware of that.
He did not disclose that to you.
No.
Would you, as an appraiser doing an appraisal of this particular property, have wanted that appraisal disclosed to you?
Not necessarily.
So you're not concerned about prior appraisals at all, but
My concern is sales comparison approach is, I would argue with the methodology there too, because it would have to include the value of the land beneath the garage.
oh, even if they were valuations or sales of garages within a condominium where there was no assignment of ownership interest.
But there's still an undivided interest in the underlying land.
Not if you don't get an additional interest in the property, you would agree with that, right?
Not if you, by virtue of the purchase of the garage,
Correct.
correct, it's usually assigned to a unit, and the interest would go with the unit.
Right, but sometimes those garage units can be sold separately, you agree?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
If I may, I have a personal experience with both garages, with FEMA, and with bank appraisals. I own a house at 1197 Westlake Avenue. This is for the benefit of the board. The bank appraisal was a two-car garage with a workshop to the rear of it. When my wife and I first purchased the house, the bank appraised the house and had the garage appraised at $20,500. A corner of the garage, the house is on a lake, a corner of the garage is in the flood hazard zone. FEMA appraised the finished garage. We renovated it, added a third bay, tore down the workshop and rebuilt it into a pottery studio. And FEMA appraised it at $67,000. I relate that to the kind of the before and after of this property, and would agree that if it were built new, that it's in the $70,000 to $90,000 range, but can also see that prior to construction, it could well have been in the $20,000 range.
I think we're going to start our rebuttal, but just to be clear, both Mr. Frankie and, again, Mr. Liberty's here, and I'm going to have him come up and testify, are testifying apples to apples. They're both testifying as to values pre-renovation. I am also going to be putting into evidence Mr. Nadeau's appraisal that was done for Mr. Damiani for the purposes of determining whether or not my client violated the flood prevention ordinance or not. That was done in January of 2016. So let's be mindful of the time frame here. We submit our materials on January 13th of 2016. This appraisal by Mr. Nadeau is done about a week and several days later on January 22nd, 2016. Was not disclosed to Mr. Frankie, wasn't disclosed to your town council, and we're going to explore that just a little bit because I think it's really important, because he comes up with a value of $75,000, based upon a sales comparison approach. And it's interesting to me, and you should ask yourselves the question, the town had an appraisal from Mr. Nadeau, yet all of a sudden goes ahead, that would have supported the value, there would be no violation, right, based upon that appraisal, yet goes ahead and selects and changes over to Mr. Frankie about 6 months later. So just keep that question.
Yeah, but he's also including the land with it.
Nadeau is not, no, because when you have a garage that's sold as a part of a limited common element, you don't get an additional land interest in the common land. So it's in a condominium, so there's no land value that's associated with it. Your land value gets associated with your condominium. What you're doing is you're buying the right to have that garage assigned to you, so there's no land value that's assigned to it. And I'll submit the appraisal, you'll see it, and that's his determination of value. And irrespective, you have a switch of experts, a switch of appraisers on that.
Just so I clear, who paid Mr. Nadeau?
Well, let's get Mr., let's bring in Mr. Damiani, because the letter's addressed to him, and he can authenticate it, right?
Well,
Do you have a copy of that?
Sure. So, Mr. Damiani, you see the letter from Mr. Nadeau. Let me back up. Mr. Damiani, at one point in time, I requested a complete copy of your file
Yes.
with respect to this, right? And you agree that that happened? Yes?
Well, as far as I know, I mean, I do remember this, I do remember talking with Mr. Nadeau.
Okay,
I don't deny that.
okay,
Um,
great.
no.
So let's have the appraisal entered into as an exhibit. And so you acknowledge speaking to Mr.
Yes, I do.
Nadeau, requesting him to provide an opinion of value, and he provided you with this opinion of value, did he
Yes,
not?
he did, as far as I mean, I'll have to look and see in my files if it's the exact same.
I'll get you a copy.
But I mean, it was a sale, does he include depreciation with this? It was a sale price. He said that's what, when the town staff was looking at this,
Okay.
it just said sale price. And to my knowledge, that, it
And
wasn't clear to me how he came up with that and,
so, Mr. Damiani, you almost immediately after you received this, though, shared this with Mr. Johnson, who's sitting right over there, correct? You recall that?
he said, yeah, I guess so.
Who's Mr. Johnson?
Right here.
I know, who is he?
He's
He holds a position-
resident Guilford.
Right, he's a resident of Guilford, and he sits on the Planning and Zoning Commission, does
Yes.
he not? And you had an extensive contact with Mr. Johnson over this particular parcel, have you not?
Yes.
And after you received this appraisal, you had a series of emails exchanges with Mr. Johnson concerning whether or not you should accept this appraisal as a valid appraisal.
Well, you have all my emails. You can I know I gave you copies of all my emails.
Do you want to go through them one by
Sure.
one?
Yeah, let's go through
All
them.
right. Now, this appraisal was dated January 22nd, is that correct?
Yes.
You received it about that date?
I'll have to double check back in my emails or into email.
Well, let's start with one of your earlier emails. You received my letter and my appraisal and the cost
Yes.
estimate about January 13th of 2016. You would agree with that?
I did receive something, yeah, exactly.
And you have an email within your file from Reggie Reed to Phil and yourself. Mark was out yesterday. He's not had a chance to review the attached information. Presumably he's forwarding on my information, correct? Would you agree with that?
I don't know, I mean, I'd have to go back and
Okay,
have
well,
to
you,
refresh myself with these emails.
and then on January 14th, you receive an email from Mr. Johnson. Do you agree with that? That's here.
Yeah, as I said, yeah.
And he asked you for a full copy of the resident appraisal completed by Charles LeBert.
That's, yeah, he did. I know I gave him one.
And
Yes.
you
Right.
supplied that to him.
Yes, I did.
And then on January 22nd, there's a couple of emails in between, but then on January 22nd, you forward to Mr. Johnson, Mr. Johnson alone. You say, see attached, presumably this appraisal from Mr. Nadeau, correct?
Well, that I'll have to double check, because I'll have to look back and see what was attached to that
Well,
email. I can't remember. I'm not saying I didn't, but.
and Mr. Johnson responds to you on January 25th, right,
Yeah.
of 2016. You agree with that? Yes?
Yeah,
And he provides you a lengthy full-page email, does he not?
yes. Oh,
Okay.
okay, Mark's, yeah.
Right? And he indicates Mark's note, right? So he obviously, at that point in time, by January 25th, had the appraisal. And he says 3 bays, 75K. Given these sales also include the location of land, which may or may not be true because he's not an appraiser, is he? He goes on to critique Mark's appraisal, does he not?
Yeah, he does, yes.
Right? And he critiques Mr. Liberty's appraisal, does he not?
Yes, probably,
And then there is a subsequent email, even yet again on that same date, another lengthy email about 2/3 of a page, where he again is critiquing those appraisals, is he not?
Well, I'll have to read it, but.
Well, you want to go ahead and take a look at that?
He talks about, yeah, he talks about, okay.
Right, and so he's arguing again for a lower value, is he not?
Says this disparity between the value on the assessor's record and depreciation provided by the appraisal.
He concludes by asking you to ask for another appraisal, does he not?
Yes, he does.
Right? And you eventually do that, don't you? Yes?
Yeah, under advice from, we discussed it with other town officials and we decided to.
Now, you also, Mark, you also discussed this with your town council on March 8th of 2016, did you not?
Did I discuss it with you about Mark? No, I don't think I did.
All right, so Mr. Damiani, you don't recall forwarding to Mr. Andrews, who's sitting right here, a copy of the prior appraisal and Mr. Liberty's appraisal?
No, I think I, did you get a copy of that? I'll have to look, I was pretty sure that, he had a copy of Mr. Liberty's and the prior appraisal with the prior owners.
Correct, the appraisal from the
I'll have
prior.
to look to see, I'm not sure about that. I'm not, I have to look back and see.
Let me pull out that.
Well, if he, Chuck says he doesn't have one, then I guess I didn't, I mean, why just, why do you like that? He says he doesn't have a copy of those appraisals.
Rather than hold up, the commission, Mark, I'm gonna come back to that, when I have a chance to find that one email, okay? I don't have anything further, but I am gonna, I will put back in that email when I do locate. What I'm gonna do now, just in the interest of time, is ask Mr. Liberty to come up, walk you through, his, appraisal, as well as comment on Mr. Nadeau's appraisal to explain why those are the better determinations of value than Mr. Frank's.
Mr. Chair, I think that's absolutely fine, but I think, given the fact that we're hearing a bunch of new stuff for the first time on rebuttal, I think you should give Mr. Frankie a chance to respond, and then he can respond again.
Okay. So,
No, I think they're gonna make their presentation, and then if Mr. Frankie has any responses, he can, and then they can respond again.
Good evening. I'm Charles LeBert. My company is called Blue Ribbon Appraisals. My office is in West Haven, Connecticut, at 311 Main Street. I was asked to do this appraisal. So I did the valuation on this property as an entire house with a three-car garage. My valuation is in the report which you'll have, which indicates the value of the property on this retrospective date of 12/1/2014, house inclusive of land and garage at $1,075,000.
can you give me a page number that you,
Sure.
please?
Page 2. Well, there's a cover page, and then page 1, and then page 2.
Yes.
So 2 pages down. So on the bottom of that report, on the bottom left, you'll see 100% value that I felt it was worth at 12/1/2014. You see it, $1,075,000. Yep. On the left side, bottom.
Yes.
Okay, good.
And that date, it was when?
12/1/2014.
Sorry.
On the following page, if you look to the, near the bottom on the right, you'll see a cost approach numbers. In that cost approach number, you'll see a garage and carport. When I do an analysis on a property and I use this cost approach, I use a Marshall Swift cost factors, and I determined that the value of the garage as new was $125 a foot, or $72,000, $72,500. Just below that, I used a physical depreciation of the entire building, which included the garage, of 5%. So here's where the final number of 68 change came, 5% less than the $72,500. When I do all of
I
my...
didn't follow that.
Okay. So,
I'm okay with the part of how you valued the garage at $125 a foot and $72,500.
right,
Then you talked about depreciation,
right.
and then I thought the third number after that you quoted was something like $68,000?
Yes.
Where does that come from?
I'm saying 5% of the $72,500
Oh,
off of the $72,500 would net us about $68,000 depreciation.
I got, okay, now I follow. Then
That
that
was-
$39,500 depreciation is
That's
the
it.
total property.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So to follow that up is that when I do an analysis on a property, I'm required, if I use BAP, to reflect the buyer's opinion, a buyer's reaction to property. I'm quite clear that the cost of the of the garage, which is mentioned here, is significantly less than, in my report, than the value that I'm saying it is. And the reason is this: I've used 2 to 3% of a purchase price in the last 20 years of all of my appraisals. And that's what a buyer's reaction, I feel, is to a 3-car garage. What I'm saying simply is this: $1 million buyer typically is a little more fussy and typically really wants a garage. And they will pay 2 to 3%. And that's consistent with all of the work that I've done and the experience, extensive experience with buyers. My former first 20 years was owning a Century 21 office that sold substantial amounts, #1 in the region, and dealt with buyers, and still do on occasion. Bottom line is, what I'm saying is that a buyer will pay more for the garage than its cost to build. And of course, that's where builders get profits and that's such, and it's important to them that they get a garage, and 2 to 3% is where I feel is the norm for buyers. I don't know if there's something further you need.
Yeah, Mr. Liberty, can you comment on the sales comparison approach performed by Mr. Nadeau, and whether or not you feel that that is also a illustrative of the value of the garage?
Okay, well, let me just tell you this part. I only saw this today. I did not preview this. I saw it today. It came to me. I looked at it. I did look at some of the sales that he had. I know they're condominiums, and what Mr. Nadeau, and I have experience with him over 30 years actually, and some years with Mr. Frankie. And yes, we don't always agree, but what it's saying here is these garages that are common with common land are worth $25,000. I'm pretty much not surprised, but I gotta say, I didn't do this work. I do respect their work, and he's supporting $75,000 for a 3-bay garage. I mean, that's simply what it says, and that's the best I can say about it. It's not my work.
Let me ask you a question. In your appraisal here, the comp number 5 has a 625 square foot barn on the property
Page 4.
that you gave $12,500 value to.
Yep.
Roughly the same size as a garage. Probably not worth as much, because I think when I went through this earlier, I saw that it was $15 a square foot was what on a replace, or on a valuation
Yep.
is what was being given for barns. And so, just why is that so low then versus 68,000?
Well, I'm not sure.
Because that was a number you put there.
That's the number I
when you
put
were-
there, right, and that's the best we can't quantify all of our issues. Important things that are relating to buyers' preferences are a little easier for us, like a garage, sometimes fireplaces, sometimes specific items, especially when you have an updated kitchen or those kind of items. When you come to a garage, you can only rely on some basic cost factors from Marshall Swift. But I can say this, in my mind, a buyer, maybe in a different time, a barn might have been, 625 foot might have been more important. But in this particular kind of marketplace, it didn't seem to have the same utility as a garage. A garage you can park your car in, and it seems to be a higher utility to the buyer's mind, at least in my experience, than a barn.
And I'm not sure you can answer this. Do we know, prior to the construction work being done, could you actually put a car in that garage, or would it have fallen through the floor? And I don't know who can answer that.
I had to actually make a basic assumption that that garage floor, as it was stated, first off, a garage doesn't have the components of a house. When you're depreciating a garage has got an outside structure, a floor, which here apparently needed some work, it has a roof, has doors. It doesn't have the kitchen and the bathrooms and the tile and the utility, where those bathrooms are located and such, so it's a completely different look at what a depreciation could be. So, I didn't feel a whole lot of feeling that this floor could have been paramount to $30,000 or $20,000. I just didn't feel that way. We put floors in. We deal with that on a regular basis. $5.50 a square foot, polished and done, and it's a 3/4 inch oak floor, sanded and 3 coats of poly. So, I don't know what the base of the floor was, but I can only make the best assumption I have. And it's consistent with all of my appraisals. And apparently it's consistent with Mr. Nadeau's opinion too. I also did have the brief to read an engineer's report, which you're probably gonna hear about. I'm more than happy to answer any other questions.
Can I just ask a couple questions? Just, Gary, you said that typically in your experience, a lot like this, a garage is worth 2 to 3% of the value of the property?
A buyer will pay 2 to 3% of the purchase price that they're, yes, I feel that way.
So the value would be 2 to 3% of what you believe the fair market value is for just the physical garage?
For the house.
For the,
So if you're buying a house at $200,000, your garage, the buyer's opinion for that may have maybe 2% at $4,000. And I see that many times when I review appraisals on homes, some for basic homes, starter homes, oftentimes not as important. What I'm saying is when you get to $1 million home, it's pretty important.
okay, I'm just wondering, I was just wondering the math. So a $100,000 house that has a house and a detached garage, you'd say it's typically 2 to 3%, it'd be $2,000 to $3,000?
That's what we use for our adjustment,
Okay,
yes.
just
Yes.
wondering. And the other thing on the value of $1,075,000, wasn't this, are you aware of when the most recent sale of this property was?
You can tell me, maybe it's probably in here. Is it on the field card, which is in the report?
I think so. I thought it was $810,000
And what
Yeah.
date was that?
in May of 2014, May 30th, 2014.
Okay, that's possible. I can only use the data that I use and find at that time. I'm not sure what the motivation was of a buyer, and I didn't see any appraisals on it. And I can't speak for somebody else's appraisal. I can only speak to the data that I have. Those are the sales. They seem to me relevant in square footage, in age, and condition. So when that happens, our numbers are pretty much based on those comparisons.
Were you aware there was another sale of the same property like a year earlier? It was on the assessor's card. It was 700 something.
I may have seen it. Of course, as I'm telling you, I'm only relying on the current data that I have at that time. I don't know what you're saying 2007?
14.
I'm sorry, 14?
Yeah, I'm just going by the assessor's card. It looks like
I just see something here, 2007. for
2007, that's correct,
Right,
2007, right?
715,000.
Yeah, 2007 for 715, and
I
then,
gotta tell you, I didn't look at any data at
Okay.
2007.
okay, no, 2007, a long time ago, you're absolutely right. But the May 2014 one of 810,000, that's,
810,000, right? I see it, it's on the field card.
right.
I'm happy to answer anything else.
I was actually going to ask a similar, because I remember seeing 800 plus or minus $1,000 as a sale for that house, and I think I was going to ask the same thing. How do you compare that, an actual sale of $800,000 to your estimate of $1 million? How do you arrive at that?
I'm not using that subject
particular-
property, I'm not using that sale as a comparison to it. I don't know the parameters or the circumstances of that sale. If he found a good deal, 2014 was obviously still at the end of our 7-year depression here, or whatever we had. And I don't know, and I didn't research the sale, or if it was a bank sale, somebody wanted, I didn't know that. But I did the search on the comparables I gave you, and felt comfortable that it met all the criteria of an appraisal. Thank you.
just before I have Mr. DeMayo come up, I'm gonna enter into, as an exhibit, an email from, I apologize, I only have, obviously I gave Mr. Andrews a copy. It's an email from Mr. Andrews to me, forwarding an email from Mr. Damiani to him. It's dated March 8th, 2016. And attached to that email were two appraisals. One was Mr. Liberty's appraisal from Blue Ribbon, which was done in January. The other was a old bank appraisal done for the property that's been alluded to by Mr. Frankie and some other folks that's, I don't believe, in evidence. Those were the two appraisals that were attached. Mr. Nadeau's appraisal that we've established Mr. Damiani was in possession of was not attached, nor is it referred to in that email to Mr. Andrews.
You say Mr. Nadeau's appraisal was not?
It was not attached. It was not disclosed to Mr. Andrews. It was fact not known to Mr. Andrews, I don't think, until I brought it to his attention at this meeting that Mr. Damiani was in possession of Mr. Nadeau's appraisal.
Do you, relative to that appraisal, do you know what the condition of those garages were?
I don't. I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
So they could have been in prime condition, and,
Well, the conclusion that you have,
I mean, they're condominiums, which are usually kept up in relatively good shape.
right, and so I think, you may have to decide this under your ordinance, but I think, we're entitled to have a functioning structure under the definition of your determination of fair market value before we're doing our repairs, right? Because you're appraising the three-car garage. I think that's what the regulation contemplates. Regulation contemplates that people can do repairs to their buildings and improve their buildings and maintain and keep their buildings. That's the purpose of having that exception there to allow that work to occur. The point
As long as it's, how does that relate to significant construction versus the insignificant construction, which is it seems like the big issue here.
Right, so it's 50% of the
Yes,
fair
it
market
is.
value of the undamaged structure. That's what the regulation says.
Okay.
50% of the undamaged structure is what the regulation says. And I think, quite frankly, again, the question is, you have a switch of appraisers. If there was a question about, geez, were the garages in better condition or not better condition? Were they bigger? Were they a little smaller? You go back to Mr. Nadeau and say, Mr. Nadeau, please, give us a better comparison. Give us more detail. Why do you go ahead and why do you shop a different expert? Why do you go ahead in 6 months go out and hire Mr. Frankie? Why don't you finish off with Mr. Nadeau? Why don't you tell your town council about the appraisal? Well, we know that there's a significant exchange between Mr. Johnson, who sits on your Planning and Zoning Commission, and Mr. Damiani. We have those emails. Mr. Damiani referred to them in his testimony before you. Right, so.
Only, I hate to be a witness in this, but let me just say a couple things. Number one, I have not seen Mr. Nadeau's, I agree with Mr. Burdon, I hadn't seen it before today. However, had Mr. Damiani asked me if I would recommend hiring Mr. Nadeau, I would have said no. Mr. Nadeau is adverse to the town in a number of many tax appeals. Based on my experience of reviewing his appeals, I have major problems with his credibility in a lot of areas. So I would certainly not have recommended hiring him. But I just need to say that. So, but you're right. I didn't know that had been done.
Yes.
My name is Mark Damiani, again, assistant town engineer. When this was all going on and I was listening to Mr. Johnson and the applicant, I was trying to make the best decision I can. I try to just refer to, I hate to really say this, to try to resolve the issue without spending any money for the town, all right? And, a lot of people over the years and you work with them, and I just thought I'd give Mr. Nadeau a call, and I just kind of see what he could have given me in terms of to help me assess, because as I also stated, I had an old bank appraisal, and I had Mr. Liberty's appraisal, and I'm not an appraiser, so I really couldn't make a decision on it, and I did, not that I had proof, but I did consult with the assessor's office in the town, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to have nothing happen there. So he did send me that, but the town did not hire Mr. Nadeau. I did ask him, you know, about what should I do, and he provided me that information, but just to let you know that the town did not pay Mr. Nadeau to do that. Subsequently, the upper management sort of stepped in, and they, it's my understanding, I didn't, but they worked with the applicant to have a third appraisal. Now, whether it would have made a difference had I said anything about that, or I was, to be honest with you, I was, you know, a layman's I was a little bit suspect of it. It wasn't clear enough for me as far as to make an accurate decision. It was kind of very generic, and to be honest with you, I didn't even pick up anything about the condominium. But I just felt I needed somewhere else to go to make a better, you know, make an informed decision. So that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question, Mr. Damian?
Yes.
The town does, the assessor's office does have a value for the garage
Yes, you
on this
do.
card. Do you know what that is?
It was like, I remember like 4,000 or something.
$4,000,
Yeah,
right?
it was.
And you spoke with Mr. Korpinski,
Wow.
and
I just didn't get enough information
Right.
to, that's like,
you weren't comfortable using that number either, the $4,000.
no, obviously I wasn't, no.
Right.
The problem with those is my understanding that, you know, even the values on the tax, that, they could be one way or the other. It has to be a current market value, and that still, isn't that back in 2000?
Yeah, that's 2013.
Well, that,
Right.
how am I gonna make how am I gonna project to 2015 and 16?
Right.
How am I gonna do that?
So you disregarded that.
Yeah, that's kind of, okay, so,
I have Mr. DeMayo come and explain to you briefly why he believes his cost approach or his costing is more accurate, the more accurate costing than the costing attached to Mr. Frankie's appraisal. Sure.
Good evening, I'm David DeMayo. I'm president of the Pat Munger Construction Company. We're located in Branford. We're about 48 years in business. Travel the state of Connecticut, mainly doing commercial and industrial construction and select residential work. I was asked to put a construction cost estimate together for the barn in question, and which I did, not seeing the valuation methods. I reached out to a company in New Hampshire called Davis Frame, who we have a relationship with. They do timber frame and post and beam frames. We used them up at the Lake Quannapock Boathouse when we built that for the town of Guilford. And they were kind enough to give me a budget value on a post and beam frame for this size garage. I reached out to a structural engineer we use to get an idea of what the timbers may be for the floor. Garage floor carrying the weight of vehicles, or several vehicles. So we had some input from outside to help us with our cost estimate. Specific to the valuation method, there's a few things that I think need to be challenged, and that is the foundation and the excavation portion, which has a total value of $403. I mean, I can't believe that anybody in this room would expect their garage to be built on wood blocks, whether it was be built in the early 1800s or today. So, you know, we carried a laid-up stone pier foundation, which I think was period appropriate, and certainly has a value of more than $403. Things that may be minor in nature, but if you were buying the garage from a contractor, you would expect them to be included. There's no mention of a permit. There's no mention of painting of the structure, which we carried a value of about $4,500 to paint the exterior of this building. and other general condition items such as dumpsters, temporary toilets, things that you would expect to be part of a project if you were hiring a contractor to build this for you. So I think the biggest part of that is that foundation and excavation portion, which collectively we had a value of about $14,000 against a $403 value. So I was merely brought in to price a structure. I'm not a real estate appraiser or an evaluator, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you may have based on what you have in front of you.
What are you going by? Is it per hour for the operating engineers that are working the excavator and other apparatus that's on the site?
That's just about exactly how I did it. I didn't bring an excavation contractor out there. A lot of it was going to be hand dug because we assumed that maybe the structure was still in place. And you're certainly in a sensitive area. But generally we carry an hourly rate for an operator on a machine and a laborer. There's usually at least a laborer with them, so that's exactly how we would do it. Any other questions that I can?
Hang on.
Sure, I'm not going anywhere.
I'm trying to now understand it. This floor structure that you speak of, in the valuation method, and I assume you're talking about Mr. Frankie's.
I have a Marshall Valuation Service document. The Marshall Valuation Service.
Okay, so what are you comparing your costs with? You've provided a cost of a new structure.
Rebuilding a
Correct.
like structure, that's correct.
Yeah, and one particular item was the flooring. And are you comparing your price for the flooring to the town's appraisal price for the flooring?
If you're referring to the valuation method, yes.
Yes.
The Marshall valuation.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
Okay. And the town's was wood joist and sheathing,
Correct.
and yours is what?
A heavier timber, and we used, I believe in my narrative, we had 3-inch wood decking, kind of group decking, on top of a heavier timber floor, taking the load of the vehicle.
I guess I'm not really understanding what this valuation method is, because the way I'm interpreting it is that this is what the cost was to build. In other words, that floor wasn't heavy timber.
I
That
don't know what it
floor,
was.
well, I assume it wasn't heavy timber. You don't know, and you're guessing that it's heavy timber. I'm guessing that it's 2x4s with, 1/4-inch plywood.
Okay?
Yeah, it isn't that either, of course, but it's something in between, I would guess. So I'm trying to see what the relevance is of comparing your floor construction with the floor construction that Mr. Frankie
Well,
determined.
let me put it this way. I spoke to my engineer. It's a three-car garage, and we're going to be putting cars in the garage. Is that a correct assumption?
It
It's a
would
garage.
be if that's what they're gonna use it for. I don't know the last time any car was ever in the garage.
That's not the position I'm coming from. I'm told that it's a three-bay car
Okay.
garage. So
Yes.
I'm going to go to an engineer and I'm gonna say, give me a design for a floor that's gonna carry an automobile, or 3 automobiles, so that's what I did.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, that part makes sense to me. But what doesn't make sense is whether this garage ever held cars on that wood floor, or what the condition of the wood floor was when cars were in there, or what the wood floor actually was. And I'm guessing that it wasn't your engineered design timber floor. And I'd state that a bet on that would be. So I'm trying to figure out the relevance of your estimate to the appraiser's estimate. You're both talking about, I think, different things.
Maybe,
Okay,
I was brought in to price
I
a
understand.
a period-style garage. We can argue what the floor was used for, I guess, till the cows come home.
No, I'm
Maybe
saying,
there was cows in it,
I would guess your price is about right, because
so,
having designed some and had them built, that yeah, I would expect that today that would be a pretty close estimate of what it would take, particularly for a timber construction garage. But I don't really have any other questions.
thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Next up. Yeah, sure, absolutely. It'll be substantial.
Okay. This is Dave's. Yeah, but, I did, he's talking about construction I did several years ago. That's about 15 years ago. So, I think that's probably, yes, sorry.
No, that's okay, I was waiting for you, that's fine. So we have nothing further at this point on the appeal aspect. So I don't know if you want us to move into the variance application.
Well, I think we should hear if Mr. Frankie wants to respond, and we can respond to anything he says since he's.
Okay,
having that
please,
check.
please do.
Thank you. Just a couple of points as I've been listening. And so you're correct. What I costed out was, to the best of my knowledge, what was there. The floor was, and I took, when I was making my notes, I was with Mr. Beckius, and he said the condition of the garage was below average and the floor was exceptionally poor. So it sat on wood blocks and heavy sill plates. And I understand what Mr. DeMeo did, which was something different. I also had a chance, this is the first time I've seen the document from Mark Nadeau, which by the way doesn't comply with appraisal standards. But the issue, and Mr. Nadeau has three sales, the three conveyances of garages, one bay garages that are in condominium units. The two of them that were sold by Gene Thompson, I'm familiar with those. Those were allocated prices as part of the entire package sale with the unit. Notwithstanding that, the condominium is different than what we have here. We've got a 244-year-old structure on a private piece of property. Here we have three sales of condominium units. We talked about undivided interest in the land, but actually, if you think about it, it doesn't represent the value of the structure. Residents of the condominium complex were buying those for use. Garages are limited common elements, which are assigned to a unit owner for use, but in theory, everybody in the complex owns an undivided interest not only in the land but in the common elements. So it's an apple and an orange. So that would be my only comment regarding Mr. Nadeau's
Do
appraisal.
you know that the 80, that address is the, that's on, no, I'm looking at the Broad Street one. Those garages are common, you know that they're common interest, not part of the unit? Because aren't those garages under the units at that location?
No, I don't think so. I think these are detached. I could be wrong. The sale goes back to 5
Seaview
years.
Terrace, those garages are separate,
Okay.
and they are common elements, you know, or not,
I bet you they were. I don't know for sure, but I'd have to look at the deed. And I'm
Okay.
not familiar with this particular sale. But the other thing is, I mean, if you think about it, the purchaser of those garages is gonna be a resident of the complex, and they're buying it to use the garage. Here's a case where we had a non-functioning, in other words, you couldn't get a car in, as my understanding, prior to the renovations, you had a wood floor that was collapsing, you could use it for storage or what have you, but you couldn't get a car in and out. And, it's on private property. So there really isn't a market, if you sold the
Anywhere
structure, there isn't a market, and it's a piece of private property, so it's, my view, all due respect to Mr. Nadeau, I just don't think it's comparable. It's not a comparable situation. So, and those are the only points that I
Okay,
have.
thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to, in terms of concluding, point out to you, if you take, Mr. DeMayo's appraisal and his number, just subtract out the structural floor. There's no floor. $12,500 comes off, $97,734. Just take it off the top. We'll concede that. You want to concede that? Garage has got a construction replacement value of
We could go on
$8,000.
with every element that's in there, so.
No, I understand, but I think
And the timbers on the roof, I'm sure, are different.
well, you,
That's, I think it's a different apple. It's an orange and an apple, compared to an apple. I wouldn't compare them as closely as you're proposing we compare them to. A timber structure, with today's design requirements, I think Mr. DeMayo's correct. It would be that, but that isn't what is on the piece of property that we're talking about.
you're entitled to have, if you're gonna go with the replacement cost method, you have to go with the replacement cost method as to what is going to cost to replace the structural components of the existing structure on the property. And what you have is a building, or had a building, that was on a fieldstone laid set of piers. It had a floor, it had 4 walls, 3 doors, one of which had been closed up for an entry door, but also 3 openings for a 3-bay garage. You had a roof. And in terms of determining the replacement cost, you're entitled to replace those 4 walls, that roof, and the floor. What I'm saying, that's what Mr. DeMayo's cost approach does. Where he differs from the cost approach identified by Mr. Frankie is Mr. Frankie leaves out some very significant elements in terms of the both the building estimate and also the marshal's valuation estimate that he used. I would suggest to you that Mr. DeMayo's approach, again, both are comparing the same things. We're putting a 4-wall structure with a roof in that particular location. Mr. DeMayo's approach is more accurate and more realistic. You related your experience of recently building a garage. I recently looked at replacing a barn up in Vermont that was going to be a 30 by 20 foot structure, relatively the same size as this garage, slightly higher walls, but no windows, no doors. My cost was much closer. It was going to be on piers, by the way. Much closer to Mr. DeMayo's cost estimate than it was to Mr. Frankie's cost estimate. You have one cost estimate of $44,000. You have another cost estimate of $97,000. Take away the floor, you're down around about $85,000. So you got about $40,000 difference. I think that Mr. DeMayo's cost approach is more accurate than the builder's cost approach, a cost estimate that Mr. Frankie has. And that's all I have to say in terms of that point in terms of conclusion. Again, I think Mr. Nadeau's appraisal is very illuminative in terms of what the fair market value of the garage is, what somebody's willing to pay for a 3-car bay garage would be at $25 a bay, which again ties back into Mr. Liberti's appraisal. Thank you. So we're ready to conclude on that, and if you want to step into the,
Well, let me ask,
if you have questions.
is it can we just move into the next?
Yes,
Or do
you don't have
we need
to-
to take action?
No, you don't have to take action, you can move into the next.
Okay.
You can-
Then,
Depending upon how we take action on this, you don't need to move into the next, though, isn't that accurate?
It's up to you. Yeah, I mean, you can take action, but you don't have to.
That's true, yes.
Because the variance is contingent on how we rule on this one.
Right,
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
what's the rule on the CBA?
ZBA is you gotta do the one first, which you presented, but you have to decide one first, but that doesn't mean they can hear you. They can hear both things, they
Right,
should
yeah.
make the decision
But
first.
when we vote, when we take action, we have to take action on number one
Yes.
before number two.
Correct.
Right.
Doesn't mean that we have to
But-
take action
Yeah.
before we hear
Correct.
the second part.
Yeah, I mean, there's no formal rule here, I don't think that
So,
the can,
what do you wanna do? What do you want to take action on this item number one, or proceed and listen to the second part and,
I would proceed.
yes, if you don't mind, please proceed with the second part. Let's see. Yeah.
Some of it's gonna be redundant.
is a copy, can I ask, is a copy of the special permit that was obtained from planning and zoning in December of 2015, is that part of the record?
I got it.
I don't remember
I
seeing
don't remember seeing it.
So I'll enter that as, I don't know what the clerk's exhibit number would be for that, we'll enter that.
That'd be six.
Also going to enter in to the record a notice of a certificate of issuance from the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Is that number 7? That would be number 7. I'm going to enter into as an exhibit as number 8, an email from Jenny Schofield, State National and Register Coordinator, State Historic Preservation Office, dated December 13, 2016. And then the last exhibit, before I turn this over quickly to Mr. Thompson, is going to be a site assessment performed Kinney and Associates. And that's dated November 18, 2015. Is that 9? And just to frame the legal issue here, we are applying for a variance under the flood prevention ordinance. And that variance procedure is spelled out in 174 section 23 for starters. We are applying under subsection A, buildings on the historic registry. We believe that we qualify there. I would then direct you to section 174, 24, subsection C, subsections 1 and 2, which deal with the elements that we need to establish before you in order to qualify. One obviously is we have to be on the historic registry. I think we've done that through that email. That's pretty conclusive. The other is that we need to establish that there is good and sufficient cause, or in essence a hardship, that would cause you to vary the strict compliance of the flood prevention ordinance. And secondly, we need to establish that we haven't denigrated public safety. And I think Mr. Thompson will speak to those issues, and I think you will find that a variance is certainly in order should you find that in fact there was a substantial improvement under the prior appeal. Any questions in terms of the ordinances or legal issues? At this point then I'll turn it over to Mr. Thompson to talk about the site.
Yes. Yes.
Good evening, Will Thompson, an architect. For the record, 28 South Fair Street, Guilford, is my address. I basically want to just touch on some features to do with the property, help you in your review. And in doing that, first of all, I want to touch on a couple specifics. It is within the historic town center on the National Register. Here's the map, attachment, properties in here. It's a signature page from the record from the mid-70s when the district was established. These happen to be a couple of photos from the basic the history room at the library, from the town archives, just to kind of get us situated. Here's some current pictures showing from the street view, historic building, stone walls, carriage house. These are several views showing the courtyard and the carriage house and the existing the main building. See from there? Google Earth aerial of the neighborhood, just to give you context. This is blowing up the area right around the buildings. So here's Whitfield, the main house, carriage house. Fairly important historic pattern. I could give you many examples throughout the town center. You know, basically the carriage house entry, roundabout, stone walls. This is septic. Coastal wetlands. Just a straight view from basically coming up from Lower Whitfield. This is town GIS, basically the same view, but just to give you context again. So there are the buildings, septic area, coastal resource. I think earlier in the other meeting, touched on this survey, but it's worth touching on a couple things. So again, here's Whitfield. It's the main house, it's the carriage house, turnabout. You notice the topography, it's relatively flat. The distance from the street to the face of the garage is basically about 52 feet, very little room for adjustment. Septic area, coastal resource. So in essence, if this assembly is to remain, like if there were address to move anything, there's really no physical place to move that accessory building. That's even if we did not address it from a historic standpoint. From a historic standpoint, we basically have a building from the 1700s that was moved in the early 1800s, very important historically in our town. An assembly with the walls and the carriage house that are very typical of the period, that really to do anything would damage that, would be detrimental to that. Further, let's just talk about the carriage house structure itself. It's been here, we're pretty certain, at least since the early 1800s, based on the frame, it might even be earlier. The house was framed originally earlier, it's up where the Congregational Church was. It's moved, I think, in the early 1820s to the site. That outbuilding has been there through how many unnamed storms, named storms, and hurricanes. So there's no example of risk to the neighborhood, health, safety, welfare, with it to remain. If we were to modify it, there's risk to the historic nature of it, first and foremost. Second of all, there really is, even if we didn't have the historic aspect, there's really no place to put it that could serve as a garage because of the grade and the limited location with septic and coastal resource. So on either of those avenues, I think it's a very strong grounds for variance. Together, they align, to my reading, with the very reason some of that language was put in the ordinance and in the FEMA guidelines that the ordinance is from. So, I mean, that's, in a nutshell, what I think the main issues are. So.
Is the intention to retain that as a garage? Or I understand
It's an
it
accessory
being a
building.
model,
I mean, it's basically an accessory
but
building.
it's a model shop.
I don't really know what their exact use is. I'm only here on the flood ordinance. I was basically brought in to look at the property, look at the setting, and as far as use, I would refer that back to my client. My understanding is it's an accessory building to the residential property.
Yeah.
And to do with what we're doing here today is we're discussing the flood ordinance, which is a building code issue.
Right.
I'm not here on any zoning issue whatsoever. Does that answer your question, Mr.
Yes,
Lombardi?
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, it does,
Okay.
thank you.
Any other questions?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
If you had to comply with the flood ordinance, what would you have to do?
To comply, you mean like if I were,
Yeah, if
let's
you-
say there was nothing there and I had to build something new?
Right, or if you had to make this in compliance, would you have to elevate it? Would you, what would,
Well, basically, no velocity zone. You actually probably couldn't build it there because it's in the velocity zone.
So currently, you could not build a garage in
Right.
that zone.
Well, in that location, you'd have to move it in and then it probably wouldn't work to do with the whole arrangement.
and then, it looks like just a corner of it's in the velocity
It
zone?
doesn't
is that
matter,
right?
it could be
Right.
3 inches.
Yeah, I have a corner of a garage.
I have properties, some other clients' properties, where they want to rebuild a building, and because it's in a velocity zone, they have to relocate if they want to do a substantial improvement.
So you'd have to at least tear part of it down, if you lost the appeal and you lost the variance, I'm just wondering what, and you still wanted an accessory thing, you'd have to, it wouldn't be just elevating? You'd
Well,
have to
the
move it?
town has offered a variance on the velocity mandate. There's a ordinance, or basically a part of the town's documents, I don't know whether it's a statute or what you call it, regulation, that was put in basically to prevent people from building a lot of residential docks in velocity zones, and then the town excluded itself from it. I'm just aware of this when I did Jacobs and Chittenden parks. But the short answer is, to comply, if it were new, you'd have a problem, but it's not new. It's an historic
Right.
structure in the National Register and the State Register, which aligns completely with the language. I'm not a lawyer, but that's how I read it.
No, I was just trying to get a sense of, you know, one of the, you're claiming there's a hardship, and it sounds like you couldn't build it in the velocity zone without perhaps getting, there may be a way of getting that moved, but I don't know if that is.
Well, the problem is you really don't have space.
Right.
You know, you're very tight, it's already very tight coming in the entry, and then you add to it the stone walls, which are a very part of the fabric of that historic assembly, and pretty special, quite frankly. You know, it's a pretty special spot. So there's really no spot to put it, other than where it is.
How much of the property is actually wetlands?
Well, I mean, I think you included Kenny's report?
Yeah.
So that will probably give you more detail, but in essence, coastal resources is that direction. So everything over that match line, I think is pretty much coastal resources. This is a different scale. You know, that's where 1 to 100, give you an order of magnitude.
But you would trace one of the, you've got a designation, don't you, on there, that like a contour line? And
Well,
that's the-
That's the digital flood line, which, you know, they're digital. But you can see, like, I don't see, here's a coastal jurisdiction line here. There's 5, there's 6. So it's generally, you know, 4.0 is somewhere in the vicinity of that corner.
Were you at elevation 5 and 6 contours on that?
5 is right there,
Yes,
6 is right there. See how they're looping?
yeah. yes.
7's there.
What's the level that you would have to raise the structure to comply with the flood hazard regulation?
You know, I didn't pull it up on this one.
Is it
Um,
13 or is it
Well,
16?
It's probably,
Is it wave
do you have
action?
It's 13 in the VE and.
So that would-
And 12 in the AE.
So it would be plus the
Okay, so it's
freeboard, and now the freeboard's changing, it's growing.
Are you now 2 feet?
I think with velocity it might be. That's a discussion I've been having on some other properties with the town, because I don't know what you've adopted yet, but in the building code it's implied. It's
You
at
become,
least-
you become functionally
Oh, it's-
obsolesced because you wouldn't have a garage.
Right,
You'd
and
have
that's the
a,
hardship.
unless you
Well,
had
I
an
think
elevator
that's-
up to it.
That's another point that the application to the Planning and Zoning Commission that was approved is not for a garage, it's for.
But this is not
a
planning
mulch.
and zoning.
Yeah, this is,
Yeah, but this
No,
is,
but
Yeah.
Special
it's what the,
permit.
it's what the building use is.
so
And the building use is
so.
not a garage. I mean, the building use, you've
Can-
converted
can I just-
to a model shop.
Yeah, but I want to just answer one thing.
Sure.
Where I started, and I think it's the most significant part, is this historic nature of this assembly.
Well,
You have, no, I just want to make, because that I think is, if I were sitting in your chair, that would be one of the primary things that would matter to me, because it's something that only exists in this spot. It reflects a pattern that is very typical of this period throughout our pretty historic town center. If you change and alter that building, its elevation significantly, its location significantly, that pattern goes away. And that's a hardship.
okay,
Any other?
I don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
I think at this point, we need to proceed into some action.
Are you, anything else?
Yeah, no, I just technically, we're just gonna enter those sheets in as exhibits, and we can, if you wanna deal with that administratively.
Okay, we can just.
Do you want me to leave?
Well, there's also in here, it's, you can't declare hardship. However, let's see, it says, yeah, this one is the FEMA that overlooks the town. It's not elevation requirement, however, the big issue is, it's a, yes, it's a
Yeah, I mean,
historic
it-
structure.
but, and like, you can put model shop in an office up in the air.
Yes, but I think
Yeah, it doesn't, it's not gonna look.
that office, that model shop, 10 feet up or 13 feet up in the air is gonna destroy the,
So we have to first go on the valuation and make a.
Yes.
Because if the valuation is within, then this becomes moot.
yes. But there is a way to, I mean, the variance is one element of approval, which would be based on the historic character.
Right.
Compliance with the flood hazard regulation. whether
You
it
should
needs to
get the,
comply
well,
with this.
excuse me, we probably need to, if we're in deliberations, probably need to speak louder so the court recorder can get this.
Actually,
I'm
I have a
sorry.
question for you
Sure.
about, you know, the floodplain and the insurance and whatnot, because that's what all this in FEMA. If we rule on it and we don't stick to what their requirements are, how does that affect the town and us having, you know, having that national flood insurance program? You know, if we go outside,
Is this
because
meeting
we
still,
say,
I'm sorry, or is it closed, right?
I think, are you, do you wanna,
Well, I just want to mention, there's a very clear methodology to this exception in the historic part of the flood ordinance. So that allows you to, if you follow that prescriptive approach, then it doesn't have an impact. Because it's not, you know, you're showing it's not detrimental, it's a specific case, it's a hardship, and this is why.
And there-
you
If
probably need to
we
speak
may,
up.
if
Right.
we may, for a while, discuss it
Okay,
for ourselves, and if you have anything to add before we take an action, I'll give you that opportunity.
Thank you.
I happen to think that there are two, that FEMA does look, and the town, and the town's ordinance does look to compliance with the regulation, and with some of the FEMA information, and I'll quote from it, however, it is unusual that any physical characteristic would give rise to a hardship that would be sufficient to justify issuing a variance to the elevation requirement. So this kind of indicates that all of the other elements you might vary, but based on having to raise a building is not a procedure that is accepted. It's more it's unacceptable to do it for elevation alone,
just,
which would, yes, go ahead.
yeah, I'm just looking, there's a letter from DEP addressing this application. Is this in the record?
I've never seen that.
Have you seen it?
This application?
Yeah, it says garage improvements 485 Whitfield, a letter dated December, it was just handed to me.
what's the date on the letter?
December 13th, 2016, received December 16th, 2016. And it's from Diane Ekovic, Bureau of Water Protection and Land Use from DEP. Have you seen?
Not seen it.
I haven't yet, but apparently, it's addressed to the town of Guilford Building Code of Appeals.
Oh, that's us.
Yeah.
Do we need to?
Yeah,
We
you
should
should
probably-
probably, yeah, no, absolutely, you should take a look
I think
at
I
it.
would like to,
I,
Do you wanna read it to me?
why don't, can we get copies and give it to
We
people?
have,
By the way, you know, got to vote tonight, you
sounds like
review
it's
everything, come
something
back.
we should be aware of.
yes, yes. I'm trying to look for the other section that I was after, which is that based on historic. That's
There's
the,
no, the other thing we had there, where's the other part of it that they variance, here it is.
oh, that's, this is the town regulation.
Oh, is that the?
I think that is, right? Oh, yeah, I may be flipping both. This, okay.
Can we make copies of that? Can we get into the selectman's office? It's locked. Do we have a copier anywhere? I can go over some of this, what my reading is, but it would be great if we could get copies to see what the DEP is saying, because I haven't read it.
And we can't get copies?
Someone's looking for a copy machine, so we can
Oh, okay.
get copies, and the applicant hasn't seen it either, so, it's. I don't know what it says.
Maybe it was in.
Because I see you guys flipping through some of the materials that apparently were delivered to you, outside of this meeting, in advance of this meeting. And what I would suggest to you is you need to look at your I don't know exactly what that is, but you need to look at your regulations.
These are
Yes.
FEMA's regulations.
Those are,
What were sent to
okay.
us. And,
Great.
I'm
Can
not
I give
sure
one
if this
to
is
everyone?
from the town, you think this is from, it's about variances.
Is that from the town? Is that the town's
I
regulation?
don't know.
745, that's a 10.
That's a town.
That's a town regulation,
And then this
okay.
is chapter 5, I believe it, of the FEMA.
Guidelines. So I would suggest to you, looking at your town regulations is really important, because that's what you need to go by. That's what regulates this particular agency. FEMA might have some other stuff out there, but what you need to be guided by is your regulations, the regulations that were adopted, or the ordinances actually. It's an town ordinance, not just a regulation, but a town ordinance that was adopted by this town, is really the guidance that you need to follow. And I think the language in your ordinances is pretty clear.
We have copies of the DEP.
Yeah, I think we're taking a look at that.
Who got copies? We did.
I
I
didn't.
put them right.
Oh,
Oh.
I'm sorry, it's right in front of me. No, well, she must have given you one too.
Oh, okay, did you,
Yeah,
you got one?
yeah.
Okay.
And there was an attachment to this. Do we have that? It says, a bulletin?
Yeah, I would object to the bulletin. You have a regulation, that's a legal document that's beyond the parameters of your.
If she submitted it to them, it's in. That's all I'm saying, Pierre. I'm not disputing you gotta apply the law, but I just wanna know what it says. For all I know, it supports your position.
I don't know. And just for the record, that document was supplied to you by Mr. Johnson, right? What didn't,
Yes, this document was supplied to me by Mr. Johnson. It seems to be addressed though to the Town of Guilford Building Code of Appeals. Can we take a quick recess, just go off the record for a bit? Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
yes,
Okay,
we'll go
great,
up.
thanks, thank you.
Do you need times for that? Okay, we're back on the record at 6:40.
I know, just to clarify, we had received, there is a letter addressed to the Building Board of Appeals, which has been passed out. It doesn't particularly say that much, frankly, on the variant, I've read it, just says, clarifies the procedure, addresses both the procedure for the Building Code of Appeals, and I think there's an agreement with that. And then it says, for the variances, and just sort of a generic system on that. So it did apparently include something from the federal regulations. When I looked at this, our regulations are, as you might expect, based on the federal regulations. They had to be sent to DEEP to make sure that they were in accordance with the FEMA regulations, and DEP has blessed them. So our regulations are okay. The federal regulations include these exceptions. There's a general variance provision, and there's like 3 areas that they call out. One is the historic, another one is an undersized lot, and another is something called functionally dependent uses, which my understanding is sort of water dependent uses, that you need to have water to, you know, to whatever. So that doesn't apply. The small lot, I don't think applies, but the historic does. And so, and that's what they're claiming they come within. This federal regulation I have is, I just copied this one. And again, it's pretty similar to this, to what ours, it mentions those same criteria. And it does say variances may be issued for the repair or rehabilitation of historic structures upon a determination that the proposed repair or rehabilitation will not preclude the structure's continuing designation as a historic structure, and the variance is the minimum necessary to preserve the historic character and design of the structure. So,
Where did you find that? I've been looking for that.
that is CFR section 60.6, variances and exceptions. I was
Out
just-
of the, oh, that's Connecticut General,
Well, no, that's the federal regulations.
Federal regulations.
And what, you have to adopt regulations consistent with that. And what our regulations say is, variances may be issued for the reconstruction, rehabilitation, restoration of structures listed on this historic register, compliance with the procedures set, except for, and they refer to the section 24C 1 through 4, and those are the conditions. And it's got to comply with those, and those conditions, it has to be the minimum necessary. It does say there has to be good sufficient cause, not result in exceptional hardship, and questions as to what that is. And you have to be given written notice, and the town engineers keep records on the record. So there is, I mean, the historic, they're claiming to come within that exception. Our regulations, the federal statutes, have a provision for that. And the question is whether you believe they've made their case, whether it comes with that. And I suppose the question is, do you think they've shown, do they have to show exceptional hardship beyond that, in addition to that? And they've given their reasons, as, you know, whether you believe them or not, as to why they say it is. So that there's no other location on the lot, and it would have, you know, whatever. And it's up to you whether you believe it or not, and whether that's, you know, satisfies the criteria. So those are, you know, that's it. I mean, there's a question in there, if you grant too many variances, will it affect your, could it affect your flood designation stuff? Yeah, there's a sentence by that in there, and that is, I think that is true, and I've read that in federal stuff too. I don't, I did ask for what's your record of granting a variance? And I think I asked Mark Damiani, who left.
I don't think we have it.
Well, he found 3 over the last 16 years.
Okay.
And in terms of how many permits have been built, he gave me the records of permits that have been issued for flood stuff since 2011, and it was I thought it was like 500 or something. So, I mean, there's been a lot of permits been issued. You haven't granted a whole lot of variances. You know, you know, if you are too loose in granting variances, it could affect your rating, and you know that could be an issue. So
Is 3 variances out of 500
well,
considered excessive?
I mean, not everyone's applied for them, but I mean, presumably the other ones they've complied, and
Right,
we
they did
make
what
them
had to
comply,
be done.
whatever. So yeah. So that was the 500 number, which you know, that's off the top of my head. It was a long list. I didn't, you know, do it, and that was since 2011. The variances, I think, went back to, well, I'll tell you what I found, what he sent me. Was one granted on December 8, 2006, one granted October 24, 2001, and one granted August 29, 2013. Those are the 3 that he pointed out. Now, I don't know, are we missing something? You guys have met a lot. I mean, you would have to meet to grant them. So, I mean, that's a suggestion that you probably haven't granted a lot, even if there were more.
I think we have a couple of options. We can I think adjourn and carry this meeting to another time, or we can take action on items number 1 and, if necessary, item number 2. Does
I think we should
members
take-
have a,
I think we should take action. We've been here, we've got the stuff fresh in
I
our
would
mind.
agree, I agree, good. Is there, on item number 1, is there a motion? I don't think I wanna make it. I mean, I can, but
You
that's something
can
that's
talk,
up to
you don't have to make a motion to talk, you can talk
Okay.
first and then make a
Yeah,
motion.
what's your feeling?
My feeling is that I would support the town in the action, because I've seen these actions before, and there's so often, the applicant's values of properties are much higher than the values, than the real values are, and that the appraiser that the town uses, an appraiser that the town has used consistently and satisfactorily. So that my inclination would be that item 1 would be a denial to support what the town has determined. On item number 2, if we can.
Well,
Should we
Okay.
finish item
Okay.
number 1 first?
Okay.
Because again,
I agree with you. I think I would support the town.
yeah, no question, there's the barns, the values, $150 a square foot to build a garage, I think is
And-
excessive.
Another thing too is, they're calling it a garage, it's for a model shop,
Yeah,
an office.
they got a special permit to
Right.
use it as something else. All right, so we're agreed that we're gonna stand with the town on the first part.
Sounds like someone ought to make a motion, and I don't think the chair's the right place to
I
do
make a
that.
motion that we, how do I correctly say this, that we go
Deny
with the
the-
town's valuation on
Deny
the
the-
property that denies them, being able to go forward based on the valuation and the amount of work done.
Right, yeah, you can just make a motion to deny the appeal.
Thank you, that was easy.
I second the motion.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Before they move on to
Opposed?
the second item, just because the hearing, I guess, isn't necessarily technically closed.
For the second item, yeah.
I do want to state, and I want to make, I can have Mr. Beckius come up and state as well, the intent is not, and never has been, to abandon the use of the garage as a garage. The use of the garage as a model shop is supplementary to the use of the garage as a garage. So there's no intent at all to abandon the garage as a garage. And I just want to be absolutely clear about that. We did this because the town compelled us to apply for that application because they are using it as a model shop, as a garage. I personally, you can't park a single car in my garage because of all the tools and equipment that I have in mind. So quite frankly, we disagreed with the town as to whether or not the machinery and items that we have in the garage are not a use of a garage as a garage. We thought that that was the easier path to pursue. So I'm just concerned about the comments that you made in that discussion. I want to make it perfectly clear that in terms of garage use, we're not abandoning it, and that's why we're seeking to keep it there and not put it up 12 feet in the air. Because it wouldn't make any sense. You couldn't drive a car there without having an elevator, and we're not going to put an elevator in it. Totally would destroy the historic heritage. So I just want to make sure that's understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Should we take the second item up? You had a section that, yes, may we see that particularly for
Sure.
how it relates to the
Well,
historic?
Well, yeah, I was, again, you're going by your regulations, that's the regulations, and your regulations say,
No, I don't have that.
that variance for specific situations is
Yeah.
under section 1. Variance may be issued for the reconstruction, rehabilitation, restoration of structures listed on the National Register of Historic Places without regard to the procedure set forth in the remainder of this article, except items C1 through C4, and provided that the proposed reconstruction, rehabilitation, restoration will not result in structures losing its historic character. So what they've done, the inside work that they've done hasn't resulted in the historic, you have to make that finding. And then you look, it makes reference to here, conditions for the variances, and it's under this, the conditions for granting the variances. Variances should only be issued upon determination it's the minimum necessary, considering the flood hazard to afford relief. And in the instance of a historical building, which is this one, the determination the variance is the minimum necessary, not to destroy the historic character and design of the building. So you could say, no exterior work, this variance doesn't allow exterior work, because presumably that might affect the historic character or whatever, because this is part of it. I don't think so I remember you could put in conditions. Variance should only be issued upon a finding good and sufficient cause, a determination that failure to grant the variance would result in exceptional hardship, and a determination that granting of a variance will not result in increased flood heights, additional threats to public safety, or extraordinary public expense. Create a nuisance, cause a fraud or victimization of the public, or conflict with existing, or conflict with local laws or ordinances. Those are the two main ones. The other ones are just sort of, other stuff you have to do if you grant it. An applicant to whom a variance is granted shall be given written notice specifying the difference between the base flood elevation and the elevation to which the structure to be built, and stating the cost of the flood insurance will be commensurate with the increased risk resulting from the reduced lowest floor elevation up to the amounts as high as $25 to $100 of insurance coverage, so it's a notice requirement you have to give. And it says the town engineer shall maintain the records of all appeal actions and report any variance to the Federal Emergency Management Agency in its biannual report. I mean, what I was reading from here is the section of variances, which we sort of include part of that. And here's the warning it includes in here. It says the Federal Insurance Administrator may review a community's findings justifying the granting of variances, and if that review indicates a pattern inconsistent with the objectives of sound floodplain management, the Federal Insurance Administrator may take appropriate action under another section. So if they find you're abusing it, they can do that. And then the next sentence reads, variances may be issued for the repair and rehabilitation of historic structures upon a determination the proposed repair and rehabilitation will not preclude the structure's continued designation as a historic structure, which this interior work apparently doesn't, and the variance is the minimum necessary to preserve the historic character and design of the structure. So that's in the Fed regs too. So.
Any comments?
Yeah, do we know if the special permit was recorded in the Guilford land records?
It was.
They generally are.
It was. I couldn't locate my copy in the file,
Okay.
so.
Now, this building is on the historic?
Yes, so
It's on the
because you said
states.
you couldn't
It's on the
find
state.
it.
I didn't find it on the National Historic Register. I went and Googled it. But
It's
the state, the letter putting it on the state record is,
it's actually
It's on the national
It's on both.
And
I
that's
could
the
only
map.
find the
That's the
Hartford
map
one.
from it, and that's,
That's the state one?
no, that's the national.
That's the national one, okay.
So if you take a look at Mrs. Schofield's email, she confirms both.
Okay.
Yes, okay, that, I'm happy you had that.
My feeling is, I think about it to myself, you can't put a garage 12 feet in the air,
Right.
assuming
Right.
it's still got garage doors. I think if we go with the historic, because it
It is.
seems to make sense, but then do we have to put something in the variance that they then don't decide to change the outside from kind of where it is now, and can we do that legally?
Yeah, I think you can put conditions to ensure that the historic character remains, and if that's something you believe that is necessary, you can say that, or, that does not authorize any change to the exterior, and they would need additional variance if they wanted to do that, or something like that.
What are you guys' feelings?
I'm in agreement. I think the the historic status of that property kind of really dictates that we not require elevation of that garage. And that the garage is maintained as a garage, and it has been before for quite a number of years. And our condition would be that it be maintained as a garage with the current, and not changed, visually changed. You know, I have the need to start discussing that it's clapboard and that it has to maintain that way, or that, but I think that that's maybe putting too much detail, and that just maintaining its current appearance is sufficient.
Well, doesn't the historic registry have some requirements? You can't
Yes.
do certain things without their,
Yes,
if they
right.
want, I guess the other thing is
And
they
we have
have
a
to.
local historic.
Right, they've got to
commission
make
as
sure
well.
that that building, both the house and the garage, remain in the historic registry, because I guess they could withdraw it and then do what they wanted, so that, is that an accurate statement?
Well, then they have
If
the
they
state,
wanted to do
they
something.
still have the state to deal with and the town. I mean, if it comes off the national register, if that were at all possible, you've got two other commissions that.
It's in the National Register, it's not something you can just take away,
Okay,
you know.
Okay, thank you.
yeah. All right.
Like we would be able to hang an antenna on it or something, or any of
Yeah,
that stuff, right?
put a,
Or in addition to.
You mean a big dish?
Yeah.
yeah, Vermont State Flower.
Yeah.
Can we first take an action if you, or,
What,
I would, go ahead.
I think it's fair to say that if the house is listed in the National Registry, that the garage might not be. And
The
that
whole
this is,
property is.
I think they probably list the homes and not the property itself.
No, it's by map. It's a map zone, it's the whole downtown district.
Well, from the research that I've done, I haven't found it on the National Registry of Historic Homes, so, but maybe that's something we can double check other than just,
I think the email from Ms. Schofield is absolutely clear. Let's just bring that out so you have it in front of you. And that is, yes, that. And so
That's energy environmental.
you'll see I inquired of her as to whether or not the property, I provided her with the property address, whether or not that is on the state historic registry and.
No, it states that, but what
Here,
I think
listen,
he's
here it
making a statement is that it doesn't say 485 Whitfield with all buildings.
It doesn't, it's the property address.
It
It's the
says,
property.
yes, the property at 485 Whitfield Street was individually listed on the State Register of Historic Places when it was created in 1975. It is also located in the Guilford Town Center, National Register of Historic District, which is listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1976. So it says the property.
It refers to the.
So I assume that that means that structures on the property are included, and that would include the garage.
I think it's a fair question, but the evidence you've heard is that the garage itself is 200 something. It
Yes.
isn't something new.
Right.
I mean, it appears to have the same characteristic, built around the same time frame. Or, I mean, the house was moved there, I think he indicated at some
Early
point.
1800s, yeah.
And you heard Al Frankie get up, who wasn't even talking about it, said it was several hundred years old and so forth. So, I mean, it appears to be old, for whatever that's worth. In terms of the condition about no changes to the exterior, is there some, I don't wanna affect the windows or something, I don't wanna be
Well,
over.
there's guidelines to do with, basically things in the National Register through the Department of Interior. And I mean, you could reference that it should be maintained in accordance with those guidelines. That could be a condition, simple, you don't have to make up the rules.
Right.
They're already there.
Okay, so any changes
Any exterior charges?
to the exterior shall be consistent with what?
With
National and
historic,
state.
basically guidelines, the historic guidelines under the Department of the Interior,
Consistent.
which is a lot of the enabling language for historic districts, for districts and so on.
Historic guidelines of what's the Department of,
It's Department of Interior, I believe,
US.
unless they've changed it.
Based on Guilford
Department of Interior, okay.
I think the national register is the national.
Yeah, so I guess the federal guidelines are in line with our.
How about, and other applicable guidelines affecting, governing this structure.
Quick question, would these restrictions be retroactively applied?
Before they construct, before any.
This is all of this is already done, so the question is, would you, in your variance, which seems to be the way you're leaning, ask them to bring this building back to its historic character?
Have there been changes to the exterior?
Yeah, garage door. is one.
Garage doors.
One garage door was added where it was a pair of swing doors.
Okay.
One bay was changed to a garage door, and I think the other two garage doors have been changed to modernized. you
Okay.
know, But that's,
Was
That's
that done
extent.
consistent with the guidelines we're talking about? Would that be consistent, do you know?
Would be a subjective call. I mean, to use an example in the town's historic district,
that's,
which are, reviewed in a similar manner, and I've gone to chair, as it happens. Many overhead garage doors have been approved. It's really just a matter of whether they look, in keeping with the character of the assembly.
And we don't have pictures to say what it was.
Right, exactly, that's why I asked before.
Do we have anywhere a picture of what it was like prior to the work
Yes.
that was done?
it's right on the appraisal.
Is it?
You see this one, you see the pair of doors here?
Right.
And then two garage doors.
And what's the current? That's the current.
No,
look.
that was before they did any work. Then the current look is on the other appraisal. Which, somewhere I saw a garage, the garage, it was in there.
It's not in the Historic District Commission, the one that you gotta, every shutter you gotta get approved?
It's not in
It's not
either
in
the
the-
town districts,
It's not in
but
either,
it's
okay, right,
within the state and federal.
okay.
I mean, another way you could handle it, you could have them review any changes to the garage. That could be, you could utilize that feature, but it's getting a little burdensome.
Yeah,
This
I
figures
just don't,
that.
I don't know, you know,
This is what it is now.
This is
That's
what it
Those
was.
guidelines are pretty straight, I mean,
Okay.
that's at least that's a body of language that defines what's appropriate and what's not.
how about we ask that you send us verification that it's consistent or something, can you do that? Or,
But that's just my judgment, sure.
I
Well,
don't know.
I wonder if we should get something from the state that accepts those changes to this structure.
Yeah, I,
That would be my information,
okay,
is that those improvements that have been made, get approval from the, whatever the state agency is that.
they may not need approval, so I think they need to verify that the
It's
change,
acceptable to them.
that it's acceptable, and if it isn't, do what it takes to get it acceptable.
And what are we talking about, the garage doors?
Yes.
Is it-
Essentially, yeah.
I think so.
I mean, that's the only major change that you've made to it.
Well, didn't they, the front was for new, didn't they put new windows in too?
Yes, yes,
Are they-
but I think that's, okay, windows are windows.
That's the,
I mean,
no, well, 6/6 or is it? They
Well, I
window
would
in the
guess
back.
that that's consistent.
If that's what they put in, you can't see them on this.
No.
But I think if the state approves the work that was done, or if not, they have to bring it within the guidelines of the state.
Well, and Andrews, I see you're drafting.
Yep,
Thank
What?
you.
we are gonna condition upon that, and if there is additional work that's required, you know, I would expect that the variance would apply to that as well.
That you get permission to do it.
Yes.
Right, I mean, don't put us into a position where you give us a variance and we have to change the doors and we can't
And
do
we
it.
meet only every 6 months, you know.
After this meeting, the guy can see why.
Yeah, are you comfortable with that? That they can
Yes.
do what the state,
Yes, yes, I am, yes.
I think I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, I've got like 3 conditions. One, any changes to the exterior of the building, excluding windows, shall be consistent with the historic guidelines of the U.S. Department of Interior and other applicable historic guidelines from state or local officials governing this structure. As to the garage doors that have been changed, the applicant shall provide verification to the commission that the changes are either consistent with the aforementioned guidelines or submit an application or or consistent with those guidelines, or make changes so that they are consistent with the guidelines and provide verification to the commission that such changes are in fact consistent with the aforementioned guidelines. That's condition 1. Condition 2 is, I'm just reading from the regs,
Okay.
which would be the applicant shall be given written notice specifying the difference between the base flood elevation and the elevation to which the structure is being built, and shall be informed that the cost of flood insurance will be commensurate with the increased risk resulting from the reduced lowest floor elevation up to amounts as high as $25 for $100 of insurance coverage. And condition number 3 is that the town engineer shall maintain records of this action and report this variance to the Federal Emergency Management Agency in its biannual report.
Question on condition 1, is there a timeline? Because, you know, 10 years to get us this stuff is not gonna be acceptable.
Okay, we can add to that, how long do you need?
Well, are we getting this from the state, or are we getting this from, because the state may respond instantly, or it may take a year? You know, I mean, just,
Yeah,
And
and
a year.
I
or
understand,
do we wanna use just, pulling language from the guidelines to justify it? Is that what you want?
no,
What are you
because
asking
that's
for?
you justifying it, I want the state to
Well,
justify
what-
it.
Yeah, I'm doing what you told me, you know, the applicable guidelines.
Right,
You shall, why don't we add to condition 1, the applicant shall report the status of compliance with this condition within 6 months from this report. And
I think that's fair. I mean,
then we'll
I'm
decide what
interested
we
in
do
closing
there.
this out, but, I mean, we all deal with different agencies.
Yeah, I understand that, I just don't want it to be 10 years from now,
Neither do I.
because, I understand it, but you can leave it open till
Yeah.
none of us here care anymore.
Right, but I mean, we can go ahead and we'll make application, we'll correspond with the state, you know, expeditiously. But I guess our concern would be is we don't wanna be in default of a condition where we have no control over a state agency.
If we respond in
Understand.
2 weeks, we're in
Right,
compliance.
we're saying you gotta report back within 6 months,
Right.
and the
Yeah.
commission shall,
And how about that you make application to the state within 30 days, 45 days? Because that'll at least show that the ball is rolling.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay, so we'll strike that last one, say the applicant shall make any required applications to the appropriate agency within 45 days from the date of its decision, and shall report on the status of the applications within 3 months from the filing of the applications.
You guys good with
Yeah.
that? Based on that, we need to make a motion.
Yes.
I made the last one.
Based on that, I see that we grant the variance, based on that criteria.
Right, so the motion is to approve the variance with the 3 conditions that I've mentioned
correct.
in one one's pretty long, and we've added to it.
And that the variance is based on the historic nature, why we're granting it is based on the historic nature of the subject property.
It's based on a finding that it is a historic property as set forth in our ordinance.
Okay,
Okay.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, none? Thank you.
Thank you for your time. You're welcome.